We'll do it again. We'll do it again. This is like the third time that I'm recording this. So hopefully it works. It's literally Friday. This episode should have been up like 4 hours ago. I don't know what to say. Sorry, babes. This week has been a lot. But anyways, hello sexy kittens. Welcome to another episode of this steaming pile of shit where I tell you about the random things I learn every week. Better known as Marissa Unfiltered, a podcast with me, Marissa. Can't believe we're 5 episodes deep. This episode will be the 5th episode. This is crazy. Like, considering earlier this year, I was like, umming and ahhing about whether or not I want to do it. This feels like a little milestone. I know it seems silly, but I cannot believe we've made it this far. There have been many times where I was like, nah, just give it up, sis. It's enough. No one cares. Not because I don't want to do this, but because I struggle a lot with motivation and concentration. I have a list of topics that's growing longer by the day, it seems. But sometimes while researching certain things, I really want to, sometimes I want to give up. Like Passport Bros, for example. I find the whole subculture quite interesting, but that's one rabbit hole that's so difficult to navigate. I've given up several times. Like my research, I'd say, is about maybe like 50 to 60% complete on that. I do want to finish it because of all of the information that I have already just sitting in my head, and I need to offload it, goddammit. But I just need, I feel like I need to do it in batches where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna sit and look into this specific person for a little bit, and then I have to go outside and just literally touch grass or just like make myself a nice alcoholic drink or something, because it's a lot, and the things that these people say is so insane. But yeah, all things considered, I'm proud of the progress I've made, and long may it continue. Woohoo! So, before we get into it, there's like a couple things. So last episode, we talked about Jared Leto, and at some point in the episode, I said something about like not believing or not. I mentioned that I found summer camps, like singers or bands having summer camps, really weird. And it was recently brought to my attention that Paramore, one of my favourite bands of all time, has a cruise. I was so confused. Apparently they've done it for a while. I didn't know this was a thing. And I consider myself a fan of Paramore. But my opinion on 30 Seconds to Mars still stands. I do think that they are different than a lot of bands and celebrities in the way that they carry themselves. Like, they really want to be a cult. So yeah, everything I said still stands, even though one of my favorite bands, I've now found out that they do something that's kind of similar to this weird band. The day Hayley Williams starts wearing white robes and just constantly insists that Paramore is a cult, then I will believe that they're a cult. But until then, they just like cruises, as far as I'm concerned. That was completely irrelevant, but I just wanted to add that bit in because in the interest of me, admitting when I'm wrong, it was a bit of information that I didn't know at the time, and now that I know it, I just want to acknowledge it, just in case, at some later date someone's like, oh, but you said this thing and it wasn't true. I reserve the right to change my mind based on new information. So that's what I didn't really change my mind, but I deserve. Yeah, anyways, before we get into everything else that I want to talk about today, and especially before I forget, I want to say thank you to everybody who has been listening. Thank you so much. I cannot believe that people actually listen to this. Like, it is a little bit shocking. I'm like, because I really thought like, oh, no one's gonna care about any of this stuff. It's just like random things that I know about and I have no one to talk to about them, and no one is actually going to care. So it was like really nice to see that people are actually listening. And a special hello to the listeners in the Netherlands and Romania. I had a look at the analytics earlier this week, and I saw that there's a fair few people who are listening in the Netherlands. Not as many in Romania, but still, hey, how you doing, girls or guys or thems? Yeah, it was. I was actually really shocked because I'm like, surely no one outside of the UK is going to listen to me. I'm not talking about things that are like specific to the UK, and I'm not going to be focusing on things that are specific to the UK, but I just assume that it would just be British people that would listen. So I was low-key shocked. I appreciate everyone who tunes in, and it's really boosting to my self-esteem. So thank you to everybody. Thanks, Hans. And yeah. Anyways, let's get into the news. This week I actually decided to talk about current events. I think I said in the first episode that I was never that I plan on talking about, what's happening in the news, like at the beginning before I go into the main topic. And then I never talked about what's happening, or it was just that one story about the lady who got her allotment salted. I hope she's doing okay. But yeah, so I literally said, "Oh, I want to talk about what's happening in the news." Sometimes I don't like focusing on what's going on in the world because it just makes me so angry. And specifically it makes me angry that more people aren't rioting in the streets and overthrowing the establishment. So instead of sounding belligerent, I choose to not speak on certain things. But this week, there's been some kind of light things. Not really. I mean, I say light, and then the first thing I'm going to talk about is actual rioting. But yeah, so I'll talk about what's happening in the news when I feel like I'm able to give a sensible opinion that doesn't sound like I'm insane. Speaking of rioting, France is literally on fire. On the 1st of May, they held protests up and down the country. And of course, the only way I knew about this was through social media, specifically Twitter, because a lot of news networks haven't really been covering it that much. I don't know why they aren't covering it though. They're probably thinking, oh, we don't want to give the UK citizens any ideas. But babes, let's be clear. If people in the UK didn't riot when we were all freezing to death during the winter, then they're not going to riot now. Back in the winter time, I saw so many people taking to TikTok of all places to cry about not being able to heat their homes or being able to afford groceries. None of them thought to riot at the time and mash up the streets, so they never will. I'm not trying to blame poor people for the hands they're dealt, but as a whole, this country is so apathetic that whenever a corporation comes out with yet another plan to fuck us all over, British people don't even get upset. Like literally earlier this week, Shell yet again announced record profits of billions of pounds because they've increased fuel prices, and people just keep going on as nothing is happening. Like things aren't getting expensive or more expensive, and the quality's declining. Not too long ago, the head of the Bank of England came out to say something along the lines of British people should just accept that we're going to be poorer, and nobody batted an eyelid. Like, some people made jokes about it on Twitter, but that was literally it. Where's the outrage when people do things like that? And by the way, the Bank of England is partially responsible for why inflation is so high. These dots are not being connected by, BBC News, ITV News, Channel 4 News. They're not being presented in the way that they are actually happening. So people, I think a lot of people just don't even really know what's going on, or they don't understand what's going on. All they do know though is that refugees are invading the country. Like, it's insane. It's diabolical. Moving on. The day after this episode airs, hopefully hopefully this is going to be up on Friday the 5th of May. I'm crossing my fingers. So basically on the 6th of May, the coronation of the newest head scrounger, King Charles, and I'm doing air quotes because fuck the monarchy. I don't care about King Charles. The coronation is going to be on the 6th of May, and I don't care because I'm not a monarchist. I don't believe that British taxpayers should be contributing to the monarchy since they're already rich as fuck, and Charles just inherited a nice 600 mil and some real estate from Lizzie. And as I said before, people are starving. Like, Kim, there's people dying. Kim being Charles. Shout out if you get that reference. According to the coronation website, the coronation is centered around a solemn religious ceremony and has remained largely unchanged for over 1,000 years. Don't say that I don't do anything nice for you, because I went and looked up some information about the coronation, even though I don't give a shit. I did it for you, hun. The coronation of His Majesty, they have a website. I think it's coronation.gov or something. The coronation of His Majesty, the King, and Her Majesty, the Queen Consort, is also a time for celebration across the nation and the Commonwealth over a weekend of special events. So on Saturday the 6th, the coronation ceremony takes place at Westminster Abbey, and there's loads of information on that I'm not going to go into. From the 6th to the 8th of May, you'll see coronation big lunches up and down the country and across the Commonwealth. If anybody in the Commonwealth is having fucking lunches to commemorate this new king, I have no words for you if that's what you're doing. And I can't even think, maybe Australia. I could see people in Australia doing little street parties and whatnot. Maybe Canada. I think a lot of people in New Zealand don't give a shit. I don't even think New Zealand is I don't know if New Zealand is a Commonwealth country. But anyway, Sunday, May 7th, a spectacular coronation concert will be performed at Windsor Castle, with iconic locations across the UK lit up using projections, lasers, drone displays and illuminations. Ooh. And then on Monday, 8th of May, a special bank holiday has been proclaimed by the Prime Minister in honour of the coronation, giving everyone the opportunity to join in with their communities and good causes through big help out activities. And I did I took a quick look at Big Help Out, and it's basically just people volunteering in honor of the coronation and of King Charles. Even that, I have opinions on. I'm like, if this was something that people in the UK did regularly, that would be such a lovely thing, but it's only happening because of King Charles. So I'm just like, whatever. But I guess at the end of the day, every little helps and all charity is welcome, I guess. I don't know. The coronation will cost taxpayers approximately £250 million. That's really great. There's literally nothing else that could be done with that money. I can't think of one thing, not a single thing. That's all the news that I have for this week. Just a bunch of reasons for me to be sarcastic, basically. Maybe I should actually start talking about the news in the beginning instead of just using it as an excuse to be really sarcastic for no reason. Actually, I think there was something else that I was going to mention. I have to go to Twitter quickly. Oh, speaking of the coronation, an artist designed a way for the masses to tune out of royal coverage. So if you don't want to hear about the coronation or anything, there's a web browser plugin that you can download, and it replaces all monarchy and coronation related stories with indigenous news. And it can be found on The Guardian. So I think I'm going to link it in the show notes. It's a bit kind of late, sorry, but I'm going to link it in the show notes. And the last bit on the coronation, actually two more things related to the coronation. The concert, so I mentioned it in the, when I was going through what's going to happen over the weekend. Here's some of the people who will be performing at this wonderful concert. So you have, Take That, a national institution at this point. You have Lionel Richie, Katy Perry, Nicole off the Nicole off the Pussycat Dolls. Why not all the other ones as well? And then you have like some other people that I don't really recognize. And you have Winnie the Pooh and Tom Cruise. What? I feel like Tom Cruise is the type of person that would go to the opening of an envelope, but like, why Winnie the Pooh? Why didn't they get Paddington? Paddington's probably sitting at home fuming. He's fuming. He's like, wow, me and Liz had this special connection and I'm not even invited to the coronation. I guess King Charles doesn't like me. And lastly, the London Metropolitan Police, aka the Met, they are just flexing their authoritarian muscles. They tweeted, "Our tolerance for any disruption, whether through protest or otherwise, will be low. We will deal robustly with anyone intent on undermining this celebration." And if that doesn't sound like something that you would see in like North Korean propaganda, I don't know what to tell you. Like, they're literally going to snuff out any form of protest. If you don't go to these celebrations with a huge smile on your face, singing "All Hail King Charles," then I guess they're gonna arrest you. So yeah, good luck. They're also employing or deploying, I guess, facial recognition technology at the celebration. So wherever there's huge crowds of people, they're gonna use facial recognition technology. So yeah, if you're planning on attending, have fun. I will literally be watching paint dry because I'd rather do that than watch anything related to the coronation. Moving swiftly on, let's get into the main topic, the reason why I've assembled you all here to listen to what I have to say. Today we're talking about the dark web, specifically about a little site called Silk Road. Silk Road is basically like I'm saying basically a lot, but essentially Silk Road is like Craigslist on the dark web. This is one of those stories that actually made me really paranoid about Googling certain things. The whole time I was hoping that I don't end up on a watch list. Surely my FBI agent knows that I'm just doing it for a story. Fingers crossed, I hope. I watched a video a while ago about how the guy who started Silk Road got caught, and it kind of jogged my memory a little bit. I was sort of familiar with it anecdotally, but I didn't know too much about it or how it worked or anything like that. I've seen people describe it as being a cross between eBay and Craigslist on the dark web. The first time I heard about Silk Road, it was around the time where the founder was caught, and it was like all over the news. Basically, it was because of its relation to the use of Bitcoin, and this was sort of around the time when Bitcoin was becoming popular as well. And, you know, a lot of people didn't really understand how cryptocurrencies worked or anything. And Bitcoin was obviously the first. I think I also saw it on the news because it was a site on the dark web. And in the early 2010s, there were a lot of news stories about the dangers of the dark web. And all the crazy things that would happen on there. I literally have this image of the dark web being like the nether realm from Mortal Kombat. To this day, I don't know if that's an accurate depiction or not, but the dark web to me feels like a boogeyman. Like, that's how the news kind of made it sound, you know, back in the day. Before we go too far, let me tell you what it actually is. For this next part, I'm going to refer to Silk Road either by the illegal or historical, just so you know which one I'm talking about. So the illegal Silk Road actually borrowed its name from the historical Silk Road, which was a network of trading routes through Europe and Asia that spanned over 4,000 miles and played a central role in economic, cultural, and political interactions between the East and the West back in the day. The name came from the lucrative trade of silk textiles, mainly from China. Similar to the historical Silk Road, the illegal Silk Road relied on individual merchants with a decentralized leadership, meaning that there was no oversight, so people could sell whatever they want to whoever they wanted. The illegal Silk Road had a rating system, apparently, which was supposed to help buyers decide who to purchase from. Unlike its historical namesake, the illegal Silk Road did not endure the rise and fall of dynasties, the Black Death, or the Mongols. If you'd like to read more about the historical Silk Road, here's some recommendations. A crash course on YouTube. They have a video titled The Silk and Ancient Trade, Crash Course World History number 9. They had another video about Silk Road as well, but that was the main one. And I recommend Crash Course in general for, like, they do bite-sized videos on different topics. So they'll have like series based on like biology, maths, chemistry, all of that sort of stuff. I also recommend Silk Roads, A History of the World by Peter Frankopan. I have that book. I haven't read it yet, but I do recommend it because it does have quite good reviews on Amazon and like other bookstores as well. From now on, when I mention the Silk Road, I mean the illegal one, unless I state otherwise. I hope that makes sense. I hope it's not too confusing. According to Wikipedia, Silk Road was launched in 2011 by Ross Ulbricht, and it was an online black market and the first modern darknet market. There's a lot of tech jargon related to how it's run, but simply put, Silk Road was on the dark web and it operated on the Tor network. TOR, which is an open source network that allows people to use it anonymously. From my understanding, the Tor network is kind of similar to a VPN in that it's meant to conceal your internet activity. However, with the Tor network, it's endlessly more secure because of the way that it encrypts your data by running it through a network of computers all over the world in a random sequence. This network is maintained by volunteers instead of with a VPN. It's maintained by the VPN provider and the user can choose what locality they want to appear in. So like on a VPN, I have one and you can kind of change your location to appear like wherever you want it to be. I think the Tor network is a little bit different than that. You're probably already gathering that the whole point of Silk Road was anonymity. Another way they ensured this was by using Bitcoin as their currency. Back in 2011, Bitcoin was the only cryptocurrency available, which is why they used it. I did a bit of research into Bitcoin while I was looking into Sam Bankman-Fried, which, by the way, in that episode, in the Forbes episode, I kept saying his name as Fried, but it's actually pronounced Freed. So my bad. I hate when people pronounce my name wrong, so I don't want to do it to someone else. even if that person's a twat. But anyways, while I was looking into SBF, I looked into Bitcoin a little bit. And the way that Bitcoin came about is really interesting because there's an air of mystery surrounding the founder. The person who's crediting for developing Bitcoin apparently he used a fake name, and he hasn't been active using that pseudonym since 2010. But also Bitcoin kind of paved the way for all the crypto scams that we hear about today. Bitcoin paved the way for Ethereum, and the Ethereum blockchain is what a lot of people use to create new cryptocurrencies that they use to scam people. And I talked a little bit about that in the Forbes episode. So back to Albrecht. He used encrypted networks on the dark web to host their site and used cryptocurrency as their accepted tender. And all of these things were used to protect the identity of himself, the other admins, and the users of Silk Road. With that in mind, they're hardly going to be using Silk Road to resell vintage clothes they bought from charity shops or trainers they bought from Nike and Adidas by training bots to bulk buy them so that they can then resell them to you for a profit. No, they're buying and selling drugs. Apparently, they did have legal products listed, but let's be real, who's going through the trouble of going to the dark web to buy stuff that you can buy on the normal internet? I actually don't know if it's any bother to access the dark web. I've never even used it, so I don't know, but I assume that it's not like easy to access. Don't quote me on that. Apparently, in the beginning, they did try to prohibit anything whose purpose was to harm or defraud. But as the site grew, it was hard to keep up with all the vendors and what they were selling. Here are allegedly some of the illegal things you can find on Silk Road. Drugs, basically all kinds of drugs, psychedelics, narcotics, amphetamines, you name it, they had it. It's alleged that over 70% of the sales on the site were from drugs. Kidneys. You can find kidneys on Silk Road. I'm assuming they did not acquire those through legal means. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. Erotica. Don't ask me what kind. I do not know, and I do not want to know. You can also find fake IDs. And who doesn't need a fake ID? I don't, but someone might. And lastly, weapons. No illegal enterprise is complete without the sale of weapons. Or so I've heard. Now, you're probably thinking, who is the genius that started this amazing site? I mentioned him in the beginning, but his name is Ross William Albrecht. And he was born on March 27th, 1987, making him currently 39 years old, and he's an Aries. Apparently, I'm compatible with Aries, but that's neither here nor there. This isn't about you, Marissa. Albrecht grew up in Austin, Texas, and he was a Boy Scout, and a very good one at that, because he ranked all the way up to Eagle Scout, which is the highest form of scout there is. It sounds like he was a really good and studious boy because along with being an Eagle Scout, he also went to college on a full ride scholarship and achieved a BA in physics. And then he went on to do his master's in some other sciencey stuff, but that was a little bit too advanced for me to understand and I kind of was bored. Basically, he was a smart cookie. He was very clever. After he finished his master's, it seems like he did try to seek legitimate employment. He did some day trading and he tried to start a video game company, but that kind of failed. He then started an online bookseller. I guess he was trying to be Bezos back in 2011 with one of his friends, but the friend moved and left Ross to run everything. And I guess Ross just got bored because he decided to start an illegal online marketplace instead. He actually kept a notebook where he wrote down plans for the site, and he would update this notebook as the site progressed. So he's basically just like giving the authorities everything they need to convict him just as it's happening, which is a little bit insane to me. When he was talking about his plan for the site, that would eventually become Silk Road, in the beginning it was called something else, and then it kind of morphed into Silk Road as it was known at the end. He wrote that he wanted a site where people could buy anything anonymously with no trail whatsoever that could lead back to them. And ladies and gentlemen, this line made me chuckle because foreshadowing. Ross's girlfriend at the time, as well as his LinkedIn page, alluded to the fact that the site's name was inspired by the historical Silk Road that we talked about in the beginning. He basically wanted to create a site free from government oversight and intervention, which aligned with his libertarian beliefs. Although he was an intelligent person, Ross didn't really have the technical know-how necessary to create this illegal enterprise. He wasn't a coder, so what did he do? He turned to the internet, of course, to find people who could do the work for him. He went on a site called Stack Overflow, which is a website where you can enlist the help of coders to solve coding problems. And he went there to find out how to access the Tor network. Basically, he was all like, hey lads, I've got this problem. I'm trying to connect my site to the Tor network. Please help. And I guess they helped him. He also posted on forums to recruit coders to work for him. Once he got the site on the Tor network and up and running, it became like really popular really quickly. Silk Road's rapid growth was due in part to an influx of users thanks to a Gawker article talking about how easy it was to buy drugs on the internet, which obviously just gave a lot of people, like, it just made a lot of people curious to see how easy it was. Do you remember Gawker, by the way? That I think I want to talk about that at some point, because I remember the way that they ended was because of like some kind of extortion, and Hulk Hogan was somehow involved. Yeah, that whole thing was crazy. But Ross made money by taking a cut of all of the sales made on the site, as well as in the beginning, he sold his own magic mushrooms that he grew himself. So not only was he clever, like book smart, but he also had a green thumb. Good for you, Ross. That was before the real legit drug dealers started flocking to the site, by the way. In the growing phase, there were a lot of cyber attacks, and some people even deployed ransomware to extort Ross until he paid them to release it, which happened several times. It was clear that he didn't know what he was doing, at least that he wasn't very tech savvy, and so it made him an easy target. The site was filled with scammers, and not just those scamming Ross. Some people were also scamming other users, as well as selling fake products or making off with people's money without delivering the product that was ordered. So basically just like eBay in the early days before PayPal. At some point, Ross changed his username on the site from admin to Dread Pirate Roberts, a name he borrowed from The Princess Bride. In both the movie and in Ross's illegal enterprise, the name was meant to be a symbol, not belonging to any one person. It was intended to be passed down in the event that the previous DPR was unable to embody the mantle. So kind of like how when a Black Panther dies, the mantle gets passed down to the next person. Everyone had pseudonyms on the site, so that wasn't unusual. Ross also made a few friends and mentors on there, the most prominent being someone who went by the name Variety Jones. It was later claimed that Jones's real name was Roger Thomas Clark, a Canadian drug smuggler who was arrested in Thailand and extradited to the US in 2015, but it's that's kind of been debated. I've seen some places say definitively that's who it was, and other places have like alleged that that's who it was. Now, this story gets even more insane, and here is where the murder plots come in. A vendor on the site ran a scam on Ross, who they knew as Dread Pirate Roberts. The scam the vendor ran was a kind of ransomware scam. This person claimed to know the identity of users and mods on Silk Road and was holding that information ransom. They claimed that they'd release it to the public if Ross didn't pay within a certain time frame and a certain amount of Bitcoin. And it was like thousands of Bitcoin as well. Someone else reached out to Ross around the same time, claiming that they wanted to enter some kind of partnership with him. And as part of the partnership, they would solve some of his problems. And it wasn't specific they just said, if there's anything we can help you out with, let us know. And that's when Ross was like, actually, I do have this little problem that's going on right now. So they made a deal. This business partner would take out the extortionist on Ross's behalf as part of good faith in the partnership, which is so crazy to me, because a couple of times, like, I'll go through other examples of things that happened to Ross as well, like while he was running the site, and it basically just reads like anything you would see on any police procedural where they're trying to entrap someone, and he falls for it every single time. Somehow in this murder for hire plot, one person turned into not one, not two, but 5 fucking people, 4 of whom had nothing to do with Silk Road, but they just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So they just happened to be in the house with the person who was originally, allegedly, scamming Ross. And so the hitman was like, hey, it's gonna be a problem to like just go in there and kill one person, so I suggest we kill everyone in the house. And there were 5 people in the house, and Ross was like, yeah, just kill them all. How much is that gonna be? And then he was haggling on the price of killing 5 people. The gag is, none of these people were real. In the end, it looked like the vendor who initially ran the scam made the whole thing up, including the fake business partner, in order to get more and more money out of Ross, who was none the wiser. So it's alleged that he didn't even know that he was scammed until much, much later on. There was also another case where a mod dropped off the radar, and Albrecht found out that this mod actually stole from him, and he wanted to teach the guy a lesson. And he was egged on by his old chum, Variety Jones, who told him that he had to make an example out of the thief, or other mods might have the same idea. And if you don't know what a mod is, it's basically a moderator, people who make sure that the users of the site are keeping with the values of what's going on. So I guess they're making sure that they're selling the right kind of kidneys, the legal ones, not the illegal ones, I guess. Here's the thing, in the case of the mod, he actually didn't run away with the money. He was arrested by a drug squad, and during the arrest, the drug squad found out about Silk Road, and 2 separate undercover agents decided to steal money from Silk Road in the form of Bitcoin. So there was this operation going on in Baltimore, Maryland, where they were like, scooping up drug dealers and the mod of Silk Road. So the whole Silk Road thing, when you're ordering drugs online, it's coming in the post, like normal USPS post. So this guy ordered a bunch of cocaine to his house. The drug squad intercepted it, and that's how they arrested him. And during the investigation, they find out about Silk Road. And on this drug squad, there were 2 dirty coppers. I'm sure there were more, but these were the ones that were like found out to be dirty, disgusting coppers. ACAB, am I right, girls? And yeah, so they stole money from Silk Road. One of the agents was a DEA agent who claimed to know who the mod was and offered to take him out. Not to dinner, but to kill him. So this DEA agent infiltrated Silk Road and spoke to Ross and was like, hey, I know that guy who stole from you. I could kill him for you if that's what you want. Except, again, they didn't kill him. They faked the whole thing. Except, they didn't kill him. They faked the whole thing the way they do in literally every police procedural or true crime documentary. They sent him the pictures of his fake murder and they just collected the money. And in this process, that's where the DEA agent just took a little few Bitcoin for himself. What I just described to you, dear listener, are 6 separate murders for hire. Except there was never any actual murder. Not that they know of, I guess. So this guy got scammed and tricked into thinking he had 6 people killed. Can you imagine? And he was okay with that, surprisingly. Like I said, the feds were watching, but they didn't know Ross's identity. There are some articles that insinuate NSA involvement, Wired specifically. Some of them were literally like, the NSA had nothing to do with this, they were not involved. Swear down, Scout's honor. So honestly, who the fuck knows? The official story is that the FBI used several tactics to track him down. A DEA investigator infiltrated the site, like I said before, and learned its operations, including noting that DPR's chats were timestamped with Pacific time, narrowing his location down to the west coast of the US of A. They seized the Silk Road server, which was located in Iceland. And lastly, an IRS agent who was working with the drug squad, who I guess embodied the spirit of Elliot Ness, used Google to track down early posts Ross made on Stack Overflow and the other site where he posted about recruiting a coder. By the way, when he was making the job postings for recruiting a coder, he used a personal email address to get people to contact him. Hans, his email address was his full fucking name. I cannot. I absolutely cannot. Like, this guy's supposed to be smart. Like, I don't understand. In October of 2013, he was arrested at the San Francisco Public Library, where the FBI ran a sting operation to catch him. At this point, they knew he frequented the library and waited for him to come in. They waited until he logged into the site, distracted him, and snatched the laptop away from him to prevent him from entering a kill switch, which would have encrypted all of the information on the computer, which also contained his little diary. A couple of months later, he was charged with engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise, narcotics conspiracy, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and conspiracy to commit computer hacking. There were some extra charges added on as well. In 2015, he was convicted of engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise, distributing narcotics by means of the internet, conspiracy to distribute narcotics, conspiracy to commit money laundering, conspiracy to traffic fraudulent identity documents, and conspiracy to commit computer hacking. And also, I don't know why they distinguished between the distributing narcotics and distributing it via the internet. I guess they really wanted to put him away for a long time. He was never charged in the murder for hire plots, but the chat logs where he commissioned the 5 murders, as well as bragging about paying for a 6, did get entered into evidence at his trial for the other stuff, and the judge actually did consider it when sentencing him. He was indicted in Maryland for the murder for hire plot surrounding his mod, but this was dropped when he received the sentence in New York. The 2 law enforcement officers who stole the Bitcoin were caught and sentenced to 6.5 and 8 years respectively. The one who was sentenced to 8 years was also found to have stolen money from the government And they only gave him 2 years for that. I don't know why they didn't throw the book at him. It is my personal belief, and this is just Marissa talking, I personally believe that police officers who commit crimes should be sentenced to longer because they literally should know better. The same way if a civilian commits a crime against a police officer, the charge is more extreme. Police officers should be held to a higher standard. Maybe then they'll stop robbing and killing people. Albrecht was sentenced to 2 life sentences plus 40 years. So he ain't getting out anytime soon, if ever. He was also ordered to pay approximately 183 million in restitution based on the total sales of illegal drugs and counterfeit IDs through Silk Road. It's important to note, I don't think he made that much from Silk Road. He did take a cut of like every single sale, but there was no way for him to have made that much money. So they said, you know what, you created it, you're responsible for everything that comes from it, and we want all your money that he doesn't have anymore because they seized all of his Bitcoin. In 2020, there were whispers that Donald Trump was considering pardoning him, but that never panned out. And when the whispers started, a lot of people were actually kind of pissed off about the whole thing. As of today, in May of 2023, he's still in prison and will likely be there for the rest of his natural life. As of for the site, it was shut down by the FBI and Europol not long after Ross's arrest in 2013. There was a 2.0 site that sprang up literally within months of the original one being shut down, and it was ran by mods of the old site, but that was also very quickly seized by the FBI. More on that later. But as a whole, that's the story behind Silk Road and Ross Ulbricht. He actually has a lot of sympathizers. When I was looking into him online, I watched a couple of videos. There was this guy who went on Joe Rogan. I don't really care much for Joe Rogan, to be honest with you. He enables a lot of conspiracy theorists and alt-right people to just like chill on his show. But there was this one, there was a movie made about Ross Ulbricht, and Joe Rogan interviewed the filmmaker, and he seemed to be a little bit sympathetic. A lot of people think that the whole thing was really tragic, and some people felt like his prison sentence was too harsh and that the murder plots should not have been a factor in sentencing because he didn't actually kill anyone, and he was scammed, even though he was gloating about having someone killed at one point. But yeah, I guess he also did say that he found, when the person who sent him the dead body, the fake dead body of his mod, he did say that it was a bit disgusting, but then he later on gloated about having someone killed. So take that all into consideration when you think about Ross. I'll give my final thoughts in the conclusion, but before that, I wanted to mention a few other people who got caught doing illegal shit on the site. And this is where I'm going to give like a light trigger warning. At some point, I will talk about, I'll mention child abuse. I won't go into any details, but just when I'm talking about Thomas White, I will be mentioning it. So maybe don't listen to this next part for like the next 5 minutes or so. Sorry. So the first person I want to talk about is Thomas White, a baby-faced 19-year-old student who was arrested in his uni accommodations in Liverpool, United Kingdom, for being the mastermind behind Silk Road 2.0. I don't know if he's from Liverpool or if he just went to uni there. It wasn't very clear. Coincidentally, when you Google the name Thomas White, the first result is for the Wikipedia page of a Thomas White who was a cloth merchant back in the 1500s. I just thought that was an interesting coincidence, considering the historical Silk Road was where Ross got his inspiration from. And this guy shares the name with a cloth merchant who was alive around the time when the historical Silk Road would have existed. I don't think it's relevant, but I just thought that was interesting. Anyways, the student, Thomas White, took up the pseudonym DPR2, as in Dread Pirate Roberts 2, and set up Silk Road 2.0, but he was caught fairly quickly. Initially, he was on Silk Road buying prescription sleep medication, and then he inadvertently joined a multi-level marketing scheme where he offered to start selling drugs for others so that he could get a discount on the drugs that he was buying for himself and to sell. It sounds like an MLM to me. But that was basically his way of getting his foot in the door. After that, he started selling MDMA and other drug-related things before becoming a tech advisor of sorts. Like his predecessor, DPR1, he was caught by law enforcement officials who infiltrated his inner circle, captured chat logs of him committed crimes, and said, yeah, I'm throwing the book at you, bub. Including him, basically, in the chat logs as well, he was bragging about starting Silk Road 2.0, and he was very open about it. So, which they already infiltrated it, so they saw him start the site, but I guess they wanted to see him actually commit illegal things. So instead of charging him with intent to do certain things, I guess they were like, yeah, we're gonna charge you with actually doing certain things. Before he was caught, he sold the site onto someone else, and according to Vice News, he became well known in tech circles, and he even had a large following on Twitter where he talked about tech related things. So he was trying to go like on the straight and narrow, and he sold the site, but the police were like, nah, we're gonna catch you. And he pleaded guilty to drug trafficking, money laundering, and making, this is the child abuse bit, making 464,000, but my note says 464. But basically he made a bunch of category A indecent images of children, and I don't know like what that means. I don't know if it's like class A drugs and like if it's the same system, and I'm kind of afraid to Google that. So yeah. And he was jailed for 5 years and 4 months. Yes, you heard that last bit correctly. 5 years. And he basically, yeah, he did all of that stuff, including crimes against children, and he only got 5 years. There was another guy who was dubbed the Pablo Escobar of Silk Road, and it's not clear on whether other people called him that or if it was just a nickname that he made for himself. But in reality, he was a Dutch computer scientist by the name of Cornelius Jan Slomp. And he allegedly made millions in Bitcoin by selling MDMA and other drugs on Silk Road. And I really hope that I don't butcher any Dutch names or pronunciations. I'm really sorry if I do. His career as a drug dealer was cut short after 15 months. He was only a drug dealer for 15 months when he was busted in an FBI operation. He was sentenced to 10 years in a US prison for his crimes. He's out now and he's actually back with his family in the Netherlands. Oh my gosh. He might be listening to this right now. Since I said in the beginning that I had listeners in the Netherlands, maybe Cornelius is one of them. Hey, if you're listening. This was not deliberate. I didn't know that there was going to be a Dutch person featured in this story when I wrote the beginning, when I wrote it down to talk about thanking the Dutch listeners. But anyways, Slomp was the protagonist of a Dutch made-for-TV movie called Silk Roads. They weren't very creative with the title. I don't know if it's good or not, mainly because I didn't bother to look it up, sorry. Allegedly, the same network that aired the movie on him did a special that inspired him years earlier to dabble with drugs in the first place. He apparently saw an episode of the TV show Spootin' and Slicken, which basically means shooting up and swallowing. Again, if I butchered that, I'm really sorry. According to the court documents, he sold roughly 104 kilograms of MDMA, 566,000 ecstasy pills, 4 kilograms of cocaine, and a bunch of other shit that included amphetamines, LSD, weed, ketamine, Xanax, basically any drug that you can think of. Cornelius probably sold. Cornelius was another one who quit before he got caught and said he did it because the job was too stressful and he'd spend upwards of 16 hours a day selling, even though he had a whole team working for him. He said he felt untouchable because he had been questioned by the Dutch authorities before, but then they never charged him with anything. So he was like, yeah, I'm a drug dealer. I'm Pablo Escobar, bitch. And he kept going until the hours caught up with him. But then the feds had been onto him for a long time. They knew about him basically the same way they knew about all these others. They infiltrated the network and started making friends with them. Basically, someone offered to take over his business on Silk Road, but the whole thing was a big old setup. When he flew to the US to finalize the deal, he was arrested as soon as he landed, and he, quote, left the airport in a police car instead of the Lamborghini he'd booked. Worry not, citizens of the Netherlands. Mr. Slomp is said to have put his life of crime behind him, saying that he's too visible, but he couldn't go back to working in an office as a coder because employers would Google him and all they'd see is all this criminal stuff. So instead, he, as of 2021 anyways, he was working as a consultant helping prisoners navigate the US prison system. I don't know exactly who pays him or like how he actually makes money off of that, but that's what he said, and I'm not gonna deny what he's saying because I don't know. I have no doubt that there are countless others who were caught and ultimately sentenced for their connections to Silk Road, and I'm absolutely certain that there's loads of vendors who were never caught. What I will do is I'll leave links where possible so that you can do further reading for yourself. I got the information for Cornelius from Vice News, and in the article he talked a bit about his time in prison, which led him to the work that I mentioned that he was doing around prisoners. And there's other details as well in there about like how he found his time in prison in the US and some other stuff as well. So if you're interested in his story, I'll leave the links in the show notes and you can look it up for yourself. Yeah, actually I don't know how much longer Vice will even be around because apparently they're filing for bankruptcy, so you might want to check those stories out as soon as possible, babes. Anyways, I've talked enough about wrong-uns, criminals, just drug dealers and alleged murderers. So let's get to the conclusion. My take is that it's insane that this site was only active for only 2.5 years, although it seems like it grew to that level by complete accident. Obviously, the site and Ross himself gained notoriety after it was shut down. He clearly had a lot of ambition and he wasn't unintelligent, but it seems like he was wandering around in the dark. And when it came to the actual practicalities of achieving his vision, he didn't really know how to do that. Out of everything that he's lost, he's lost money, he lost his girlfriend, but most importantly, he lost his freedom. To me, this whole thing is really tragic. If you're looking at the story from Ross's perspective, that is, the amount of wasted potential is astounding. His life could have gone in so many different legal directions. He could have been some kind of physicist, he could have cashed out of Silk Road early, way before he got, on the hook by the FBI. And he still would have been really rich off of the amount of Bitcoin that he had. So many other things could have happened, but instead he's behind bars for the rest of his life. It goes to show how one bad decision can lead someone down a path where eventually they reach the point of no return. Although I didn't talk too much about them, people did die from the drugs that Ross enabled them to purchase on Silk Road. There was this one case of someone who jumped off a balcony during a bad trip and met their untimely end. Basically, someone took drugs that they bought off of Silk Road. They had a bad trip and they got so worried and frantic and jumped off a balcony, and it was a really big story. I'm sure there's hundreds of other cases that we don't even know about of overdoses and, all sorts of things. There are also people who potentially had their identities stolen and sold on to users on the site, because not all fake IDs are from people who are already dead. Some fake IDs include people who are still very much alive who have had their identities stolen. And so many other crimes that are connected to some kind of illegal activity that Silk Road facilitated. Remember all of the products that I said they sold? The kidneys and whatnot? From the court's perspective, Albrecht's sentence was not only punishment for the crimes he himself committed, but it also sends a message to others who wish to do the same. And the judge even said that in the closing when they were sentencing him. And obviously the IRS are like, how dare you make money and not cut us in? I don't know if they said that or not, but I feel like that's something the IRS would say. This whole story is incredibly fascinating to me. I can't help but think of what Silk Road would have been like if Ross was actually hip to concealing his identity better, not as trusting as he was, and tech savvy. I'm pretty sure it would have been even bigger than it was at the time, especially if that was all happening, with today's technology. I'm sure there's loads of sites on the dark web these days that have replaced Silk Road in terms of the services they offer, and the authorities are having a hard time tracking them, purely because of how far technology has advanced. I'm 100% sure criminal masterminds saw Dread Pirate Roberts as both a cautionary tale and an inspiration. I don't even know what the takeaway of this episode is. I guess if you're going to run $1 billion drug enterprise on the internet, don't use your real email address. I don't know. That was one of the main things that stuck out to me. What? You would use your real email address to set up an illegal company? Okay, if we were to talk about what my real takeaways were, I guess it's just, I don't know. I don't want to diagnose anyone with anything, but Ross was very meticulous with, keeping notes and things. He was obviously a smart person academically, but it seems like he wasn't street smart at all, and he just took people at face value, just took them at their word, and that was basically his downfall. The amount of times he got scammed, people would literally just message Dread Pirate Roberts and be like, hey, I know something, I know your identity, or I know the identity of someone who's really prominent in your hierarchy, give me money or I'm gonna tell everyone. What? And he just kept believing them. At some point you have to call people on their bluff, which is why I do not think that I would be a good criminal, because I'm terrible at calling people on their bluff. I'm so gullible that I would probably, I'm Ross. I guess that's also why I'm poor guy, because I'm as gullible as he is. And so I know that I shouldn't be doing anything illegal, because, oh my gosh, just my conscience alone would eat me alive. But then also, if someone came to me and was like, hey, I'm the FBI, you need to hand everything over, I'd be like, okay. And then they just make off with my money. But anyways, that's the story of Silk Road. It was very interesting looking into it. There's so much more. What I wanted to do in this episode, actually, I wanted to look also at a couple other, I wanted to look at maybe 5 other criminals that were associated with Silk Road, but the time it took to like find these stories, make sure that it was all like legitimate, because I'd find information about one person, and then in order to verify that, I'd look at other, more reputable sources than YouTube, and the information wasn't really there. It was hard to find information on some of the people. Variety Jones was another one. So I wanted to go deeper into their stories as well, to kind of create an ecosystem of sorts of like all the people connected to Silk Road, but the information just wasn't there. Anyways, that's enough about Silk Road. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that riveting tale about Silk Road and all the dumb people, the dumb criminals that were operating on the site. Now, to end on a good note, a positive, heartwarming note, I'd like to tell you about a 7th grader in Michigan who is being called a hero for stopping a bus full of his peers after the driver fainted. So I first saw the video on Twitter and I was like, wow, that's actually great. The 13-year-old boy, whose name is Dylan, noticed that the bus driver was unconscious, and he sprang into action by grabbing hold of the steering wheel and pushing on the brakes to stop the bus. Honestly, me describing the video isn't doing it justice, so I'll leave a link to the article in the show notes, and I'm about to quote some stuff from the article, so I'll leave a link in the show notes. The superintendent of the school district where the boy went to school said, "I could not be prouder of his efforts. He had the wherewithal to push the brakes slowly, likely in anticipation that the bus was full of passengers, and obviously he wasn't trying to injure anyone." And he also said it was an extraordinary act of courage and maturity. And if you saw the video, like, it honestly, this kid literally just like comes out of nowhere and he grabs hold of this steering wheel, and then he like pushes down on the brake as the lady's fainting, and then the bus like slowly stops, and he's yelling, "Call 999, not 999, fucking hell, call 911." And the kids are like shouting, and he was like, "I don't care, just do it." And it was just like, so he really was taking charge of the situation, which I feel like, I know a 12-year-old, and I don't know if I would trust her to be this brave in this situation. So it's actually nice to see. What happened was that the driver started feeling lightheaded and announced on the intercom that she was going to pull over for a moment, but she never arrived at the area that she was gonna pull. It was like a stopping place. She never arrived there, so she drove past it, or she didn't make it there in time, and she started drifting into the oncoming lane of traffic. And that's when the boy Dylan noticed what was happening, and he stepped in. His mom said, "To do something like this fills my heart. It makes my heart skip a beat. To even watch that video again, I can't even express the proudness. I'm extremely proud of him." I don't know him, so I feel weird saying I'm proud of him, but it was really like inspiring to see. Now I want to teach the 2 kids that I have, in my life, that if stuff like this happens, like, this is what you do, and you have to be like confident in doing it. So yeah, that's a story. Give that kid a medal, I say, honestly. Give him a medal and a cookie. I think he deserves both. But yeah, that's it for the good news. And that's it for this week. That was definitely a lot. I've been recording for an hour and a half. So let's see how much of that I cut out of me just basically saying, yeah. I say that a lot, so I end up cutting out a lot. But I think this one will definitely be longer than all the other episodes. Like I said, I do want to do longer episodes. It just takes long to write, and then to record, and then to edit. But with time, I will get to my goal of an hour and a half of edited, recorded content. I think that's kind of where I really like longer podcasts, so that's what I'm trying to achieve. And hopefully you enjoyed this episode, enjoyed the story of Silk Road. I definitely recommend doing your own Googles, because as much as the information that I presented is, factual, and I double and triple checked it to make sure that it was, I'm here for your entertainment, baby. I'm not here to be taken seriously, and I don't want to be taken seriously on the internet unless I'm saying things about the monarchy. Then you can take me seriously, because fuck them. But yeah, do your own research at the end of the day and tune in next week. If you did enjoy this episode and the other episodes as well, please leave me a rating and a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and wherever else you can leave reviews. That would be much appreciated. Anyways, like I said, thank you. That's it for this week. As always, don't forget to drink water, crush the enemy, be kind to yourself, and go scam someone. Bye.